We've talked previously about exotic design, both good and bad, but we have yet to talk a lot about exotic armor reworks. Every recent season has brought us new reworks, some of which have been good, and a lot have not been so good. Of course, for season 23, we got a new set of exotic reworks along with the release of the season. There is one rework in particular out of these that really caught my attention, as it made it not only a new viable pick, but also lean more heavily into its power fantasy way more than it ever did before. I think Bungie should apply this type of rework to more exotics in the future, so let's talk about what went right with them and why this rework is so good. Hey everyone, I'm Rizeki, and welcome to my design analysis of the Hunter Exotic rework for Celestial Nighthawk. Whether you've seen my videos before, or maybe you're brand new, thanks for tuning in. If you like what I have to say, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to get more Destiny design videos in your YouTube feed every single week. And if you have any ideas or thoughts of your own while watching the video, definitely let me know either in the comment section down below or over in our Discord server linked in the video description. But with all that out of the way, let's talk exotic reworks. To start, we could quickly go over my reasons for what makes an exotic good in the first place. You might recognize these from my original exotic design video, and, well, that's because it's the literal same list. But here it is as a refresher for those of you who aren't familiar. Number 1, an exotic must have a unique effect that augments your playstyle. Number 2, the effect must synergize well with your subclass and or promote build crafting. 3, the effect should provide interesting emergent gameplay, which, for those of you unfamiliar, is a combination of game mechanics leading to new, unintended, but fun gameplay. And 4, it should be a pretty easy to understand effect. I'm going to use these key points to highlight issues with the exotic pre-rework, and then talk about how they changed it to fit my criteria post-rework. With that said, we could jump right in. Pre-rework Celestial Nighthawk was a very simple exotic. Released originally in Season 1, it was very much a Year 1 exotic. Its effect was as follows. Transform your solar golden gun super into a single high damage shot. If you kill a target, you are refunded 1/3 of your super energy. Being a super augmentation exotic, Celestial Nighthawk was mostly relegated to being a burst DPS choice, and ended up being a hot swap during a boss or pretty much nothing. There really was no reason to run it for general combat since it only provided a benefit after your super was fully charged. The effect itself was fine, but it didn't provide any extra utilities, so it mostly went unused. But let's get a little more technical. Time to go through our checklist. Does Nighthawk have a unique effect that augments our playstyle? Well, it does. It's the only exotic that changes how our super works entirely. We do have Star Eater scales, but those only increase the damage output and not fundamentally how the super works. But we could also argue that it doesn't really change our playstyle at all. Our general gameplay loop is unaffected. We just play until we get our super. Even Pyrogale Gauntlets, the Titan exotic, adds Solar Cyclones to the Consecration ability, despite being primarily a super augmentation effect. It's not much, but it's definitively more than Nighthawk, which provided nothing outside of the super augmentation. So we're left with a, yeah, kinda answer for this checkpoint. We could argue it either way, but to really hit my criteria, it needs to be a solid yes. What about subclass synergies and build crafting? Well, again, since our effect only changes our super, it doesn't really give us many options for build crafting. Maybe while kinetic surges buff its damage it did, but really nothing outside of that. Of course, it has some synergy with solar since, well, it changes our solar super. This one gets a hard no from me. It really didn't do anything to expand our subclass besides letting us just kind of do more damage with our super. How about emergent gameplay? As a reminder, emergent gameplay refers to anything that a mechanic adds to the gameplay that may or may not be intended. There's nothing here either. The only thing I could say here is that killing an enemy with Nighthawk causes them to explode, damaging nearby enemies, but really it's not that often that we're using it to kill lesser adds since it's primarily just a burst DPS super. But is it easy to understand though? I think we could all agree that this one is pretty easily satisfied. Make super a single high damage shot. You can't really get much easier than that. So our good friend Nighthawk gets a 1 out of 4 on our exotic checklist. Maybe a 1.5 out of 4 if we're being generous. What could Bungie have done to make this better? Well, we have that answer. Time to look at the rework from Season 23. Post-rework Celestial Nighthawk still has that same super augmentation effect with some new toys to play with during general gameplay. Here's the new description. Precision final blows reduce the cooldown of your super. Modifies Golden Gun to fire a single high damage shot. Targets defeated by that shot give you super energy and explode. There's a single new line here. Precision final blows now reduce the cooldown of our super. Why the heck does this change everything about this exotic? First, we need to go over the power fantasy of the Solar Hunter and Celestial Nighthawk. Solar Hunters can spec into pretty much one of two power fantasies. We have the Knife Slinger and the Gunslinger. Hunter players will probably be quick to tell you that running Solar feels like you're being pigeonholed into Knife Slinger. It's good, it's fun, but sometimes we just want to be a cowboy. Nighthawk always wanted to play into this fantasy, and the single shot super kind of felt like a Wild West 1v1 duel. One shot, one kill. But outside of that, it didn't really do anything to make you feel like a gunslinger cowboy. Now that precision kills refund our super, not only is it high noon somewhere in the world during our super, but we also have an incentive to be a dead-eye shot during normal gameplay. We are rewarded for actually becoming gunslingers and headshotting enemies. Be the gunslinger, get a ton of precision kills, pull out our golden gun, repeat. Now the gunslingers out there have an exotic that really fills out that playstyle. We've been given a way to lean right into that cowboy power fantasy. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. What about my checklist? Have we improved the general gameplay and play style of Nighthawk? I'd say we have. Since now we have the ability to generate super energy with precision kills, we now need to intentionally defeat targets with precision shots to make the most out of our exotic. Not only that, but we don't have to save our super for burst DPS since we could regenerate our super energy quickly by just killing more enemies. From here, we kind of flow right into synergies and build crafting. In our subclass, we already have a direct synergy with precision hits. Our on your mark aspect procs on precision kills. We also have some fragment synergies, as we could take Ember of Tempering to gain restoration by killing enemies with our solar weapons. We're trying to kill as many adds as possible, so we naturally proc this so long as we're using a solar weapon. We could also start to add in a bunch of other combos to get as many orbs as possible for even faster supers. Obvious choices here are solar siphons, but we could also take things like Ember of Wonder if we take other subclass options like Gunpowder Gamble, which, as a side note, feeds more into our gunslinger cowboy fantasy for ignition synergies. Lots of options here to explore now that we have a neutral game to play with. I think the options for build crafting have greatly improved, and I think we could check this criteria off the list. I think that for emergent gameplay, we have some overlap with the build crafting section. Some things to note here would be the chance for players to have more skill expression, since skilled players will probably have a high uptime on their super because of the number of precision kills they will get. I also think there's some interesting gameplay to explore with refreshing restoration effects as you regain super energy. I will say though, that a lot of the emergent gameplay is as a result of the build crafting, and not necessarily the exotic itself. Regardless, this section has greatly improved from the original version of Nighthawk, since there was pretty much nothing at all to account for. So I'm going to give this criteria a pass as well. Finally, I think this exotic retains its easy to understand description. Get precision kills, and you're rewarded with a single high damage golden gun shot. So again, this criteria is still a pass for me. With all this accounted for, we have pretty much passed all 4 of my criteria with flying colors. So, in short, Celestial Nighthawk passes my "is this exotic well designed" question. We have not only passed on the checklist, but we already went over how this exotic also is the perfect companion for those hunters who want to lean heavy into the gunslinger fantasy. What's really amazing to me is that all of this came from a really simple change to the exotic. Reworks don't have to be sweeping changes, so long as the changes provide enough to bring the exotic back into the limelight. In the case of Nighthawk here, our precision kills change immediately improved the gameplay feels of the gunslinger fantasy, and I think that's all that was really needed. Maybe you noticed, but I never once mentioned the 25% damage buff to the golden gun shot. Players and devs will sometimes get caught into the pit of focusing on numbers changes to improve gameplay feels. This only really works when the core gameplay of the exotic is solid. Just look at all the reworks that added an intrinsic surge mod. Mask of Bakras, for example, still doesn't get used much, despite a whopping 25% surge buff to arc weapons. The exotic is just kind of boring in the gameplay department, even if I do think the Tracer Dash is pretty cool. A numbers change doesn't affect the core reason as to why it feels bad to play. Our 25% buff to Nighthawk literally doesn't matter in the grand scale of things since the exotic's core gameplay was fixed. The damage buff is just really a nice to have feature. Numbers may be incentives for players to try an exotic, but they won't continue to use it unless it's actually fun to play or seriously impactful in some other way. Nighthawk's rework is successful because it gives players a reason to build into a particular power fantasy. I know I've been having a blast tapping heads and firing off my golden gun all the time. Maybe it will be worth taking a look into an exotic rework that was completely changed and go over whether or not the same could have been accomplished through a simpler change, like with Nighthawk. Or maybe looking into an exotic rework that was mostly just a numbers change and balance changes. Let me know if you want to see a video about something like that in the future. To sum up my final thoughts, I think the Celestial Nighthawk rework was the perfect change to bring the exotic back up to modern standards without completely overhauling it, while maintaining and improving its core power fantasy. We see literally the same changes for Shards of Galanor, but for the Knife Slinger power fantasy instead. I have yet to play much with the other classes reworks this season, so it'll be interesting to see if there's a similar theme of simple yet effective changes for this particular group of exotic reworks outside of the Hunter class. Again, if there's a particular exotic you want me to analyze, let me know. I want to see Bungie continue down this path, and maybe we could see less surges and more gameplay changes in the future? Celestial Nighthawk was a great example of how to do a rework right. But hey, maybe that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Was this a good rework? Are you using this or other new reworks this season? Let me know down below or over in our Discord server. And if you really liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more. I'll be doing more exotic deep dives like this in the future for all the classes, not just Hunter. And of course, if you want to see me talk about other exotics, reworks, or anything else design related, let me know down in the comment section below, and I'll try my best to put out a video about it in the future. But that's all I've got for now. As always, I've been Rizeki, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.